So my name's Josh Isenberg, and I would consider myself a front of house engineer first and a production manager professionally for touring national acts out of Nashville and the surrounding region. I don't know, I'd have to say, like, we used to grow up digging worms ourselves and fishing and camping all at the same time. So just not any one particular memory, but just the feeling of having a lot of those collective memories of spending time with my brother, my father, and having a lot of outdoor experiences that way. But just, when I think about my childhood, I just think about being quiet in the woods, and not necessarily one particular memory, but just the feeling that you get from being quiet in the woods, and the extrapolation of that over the years. That's my memory of it. I had a friend tell me one time, like, the things that you're the most passionate about from like the ages of 8 to 15, you need to figure out a way to make a living doing those things, because that's when your heart's the most tender. You're the most apt to be open to new experiences, influences. You're learning what you like about the world and trying to figure out what those things are in that age. And you're the most passionate about the things that you find passion for within that age range. And for me, it was outdoors and music. That's the things that we had growing up. Music connection in childhood. So I had two angels on my shoulders. My mother is the quiet, conservative, Southern Baptist, Kentucky Christian woman that she is, that holds us all together. And my dad's a little bit more of the rough edge, backwoods, good old boy. So I grew up on Sundays going to church, asking forgiveness for all the sins that we did on Saturday with Dad. But it was a good, well-rounded Southern education of all things. I mean, so I got Southern rock and roll, and I got country, and I got the tear in my beer country and everything between that, from Merle Haggard to Led Zeppelin from my dad. And then I got all of the hymnals and all of the tradition, bluegrass, gospel, all of that stuff from my mother's side. So having the two combinations of things, looking back on it now, it makes sense where I ended up, I think, given the fact that it took a lot of work and it didn't happen by accident. But because of those natural influences of the region I grew up in and the things that were just around us all the time, especially in rural Kentucky, I didn't realize at the time, but it was definitely setting the scene for what would come for me in my career. Well, banjo's a blessing and a curse. It finds you and you find it, but banjo is more of a birthright to me. I feel like it's an accumulation of my culture, and where I come from, I don't think there's more of a quintessential instrument. Maybe the acoustic guitar, banjo, or a mandolin, maybe, but banjo always stuck out as, like, if I really want to represent where I come from in my state in the most sincere, honest way, the ear comes to the timbre of that instrument, for sure, and everything that comes with it. So it's kind of just, I play it to tip the cap to my culture, and I always will for that reason. And I've never played for any intention of trying to have anybody hear me. You play for audiences and you play for yourself, and there are two different concepts behind that. And a lot of that's just more for me to keep a connection with where I came from, and that's what music does for all of us too.
Yeah, some
Backwoods rural culture, as far as just the 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 genuine, sincere gathering of people to. Yeah, Ohio County in Kentucky is a great example of this. There's a barn dance up there, the same birthplace of Bill Monroe. It's where he's buried. And Ohio County's not that far from where I grew up. And they have a barn dance down there, and have had for traditionally years and years and years. And the whole concept behind it is that they'll gather in the general store next to the barn where they play. They'll have their coffee, they'll have their pie, they'll have their cigarette, whatever. They'll sit around and figure out what tunes they're going to walk across the barn with and work up for the audience that showed up. The thought of that circle of people sipping their coffee, trading licks. That everybody's seen that, whether you're from that culture or not. That campfire mentality, I guess it would be, but in this instance, it was a general store and in the back of, an old coffee shop. But that picture comes to mind when you talk about encapsulating culture, because music and lyrics especially are stories, and stories are important to our culture. So the stories come from those songs, and those songs are our culture. They are, by definition, the culture that defines where you come from. That's why we always consider blues to be associated with Memphis or Chicago, and that's why, all of the things that come from where I come from are associated with that type of music, that type of culture. And in the same way that country music has with Nashville, is there's such a deep-rooted history in it that people like to talk about it like a family lineage more than they do just the history of music, about how this person played in this person's band and they got to know this person, and that there's a whole family tree of how it got passed down through. There's an energy. Some people would call it vibe. A vibe is short for vibrations, which is what we all live and breathe by, is vibrations. Our music is vibrations. Our speaking, everything is done through that. So it's inherently picking up on an energy that you can't necessarily put a finger on it. I struggled with understanding that value for a long time for myself, as well as being around other people. But you live in a world where you're constantly, everything is magnified, because you're living in small quarters together on the road. You're in a venue together all day. You're on a bus together all day. You're this or that. You're getting through airport. It really is building your pirate ship and filling it full of your pirates, and you're going to go out and conquer the world together. So having the right dynamic, having the right energy, having the right people on board that understand a lot of things that go unspoken, that are really important, just not just because they're unspoken, but just etiquette of being around people, understanding, having enough, having a proper amount of what we call emotional intelligence to be able to decipher social and professional situations from day to day, and from tour to tour, especially being able to read people quickly, being able to understand what they need from you and not give them any more, because we're all out there to do a job. We all have a certain amount of bandwidth that we can focus on. So you don't ever want to try to overload somebody with too much attention or too much energy, or it's just kind of learning how to learning how to coexist on a tour, learning how to coexist on a stage in a band. It's all the same way that you learn how to play with the other musicians. There's a push and a pull to it. And understanding that is what allows peace to be in the room. And that peace is what cultivates a good environment, a good vibe, a good music, good everything, is clearing out the noise so you can focus on what's important. And having a good team of people that understand that don't raise, we're talking audio, people that you bring around you that don't raise your noise floor. You want them to lower your noise floor so that the peace of mind is there, so that everything can come from a flow state. The music can come from a flow state. The musicians can play better because they're not stressed about the production. The production is being handled. And it's all this very symbiotic, delicate, fragile relationship and dance that you have to figure out. I know it feels convoluted explaining it, but that's really what it is in essence. Is the hang itself is learning how to work with and around and amongst everybody else that's there, understanding their energies, knowing when to match their energies, knowing when to leave people alone, knowing when something needs to be pushed, something needs to be pulled, all those things. And we can relate all of that to music, to audio, to playing together on stage, to working together on a tour. It's all that fluctuation, that yin and yang of learning how to coexist.
Yeah.
But I don't see myself as a tech person, and I think the social aspects of that, the dynamic of what I would consider to be emotional intelligence, is getting lost on a generation that's stuck in their phones. And even though I say that ironically, because most of the day to do my job, I am, of course, stuck in my phone. But doing it professionally and understanding where the cutoff is and understanding that music and what we do for a living, our industry is an industry of emotion, is what I refer to it as. When people ask me, how do you explain the music business to somebody who doesn't know, somebody who's not aware, it's an industry of emotion, bottom line. People are paying to come see you play because they are emotionally attached to something, or else they wouldn't spend their hard-earned money on a ticket to have one evening of bliss with the artist of their choosing, right? And we wouldn't have someone to play for if the audience didn't show up. So it's this cyclical love giving and returning back and forth the whole time, which is why the band plays better when the audience is hot and vice versa. Right? There's an energy exchange all the time.
Boy, you're making me think.
The complete absence of distraction. For one, obviously, if we're doing our jobs right, we're not being paid attention to during the show, at least. It's nice at the end of the show for people like yourself, that's how we met, to come up and be listening with intent for a certain sonic quality that we try to present every night. I feel like the better the sonic quality, the less people are distracted by what's happening in the room, that allows them to have a true emotional moment if they choose to. Those moments are not discovered, they're created, right? You don't walk into an empty hall and expect to just have an emotional moment with a situation or whatever have you. But that's why all the notes that we play or the notes that we're mixing, they're all important, and they're all equally important in a very high standard way, that because you never know what note is going to be played that's going to turn the key on the heart, so to speak, of the person listening. It could be the first note, last note, somewhere in the middle. You never know. So to complement but not distract from that performance as much as possible, having the levels just right to where you're not focused on, the voice is harsh, and all of a sudden you're distracted from the moment because you heard something that felt off to you. Well, that distraction takes you away from you feeling your own emotion, which is what you came subconsciously or consciously. You might not realize that's why, but when you boil the sugar down, that's exactly what it is. And understanding that from someone who grew up going to shows, looking for those moments, wanting to, I got to see, for an example, I got to see Merle Haggard's last show that he ever played at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. And I cried. It was because getting to hear the man that sang the songs that I grew up listening to, but not only that, getting to hear those songs from the guy who wrote them, and knowing that those were the songs that my father sang to us when we were in the crib, when we were in diapers. There's a mobile that was over my one of my niece's cribs that says "Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Star," and that's one of Merle's songs, one of his more famous songs. And so, having the history with that kind of stuff, I know what it is to understand the importance of those moments when you experience them yourself. So it's putting yourself in the audience's shoes every night, knowing that at some point, somewhere along the way, something that was done by that artist spoke to that person enough for them to get them in the building. That takes a lot of effort to do that. It takes a lot of emotion to do that. So it's why it's hard for people to fill venues these days with people coming out. And I know the economy is part of it too, but that's one of the reasons why I chose live concerts, because you can't always grasp that energy by listening to the CD, even though they try to. And a lot of people succeed. Not to say that it's not impossible to capture real energy that you're looking for in a studio setting, but why go to the live show at all if you could have the CD? people still do. So there's something there to think about. You know, they're going for that energy. They're going to be a part of a group of collective people that are looking for that same energy, that same effect from an evening with or an evening out with whatever music they choose. It's all about the mentality that you embrace it with, right? And we've seen every aspect of that in this business. It's a right brain versus a left brain idea, and that the industry, when you zoom out at it, seems left brain. It seems very technical, very analytical, very, you know, sterile in that aspect, especially in the digital world we live in now. And then the other side is the right brain, the artistic, the whimsical, the dreamer, all of those types of personalities. And I think loving both sides of that in their own way in this incarnation of what we do, it allows me to use both worlds equally, and it just enough of each for me to stay involved and happy with what I'm doing, because I can never just think about audio just technical, and you can't serve it if you think about it just artistically. You have to have some of both to make it work. So the answer to this question might be more surprising than what people think, especially someone who's not inundated with this, is architecture. I look at architecture. I come into the room, if it say it's a theater, any given theater or what have you, because you get into different venues, types, arenas, clubs, this and that, they all have different challenges to them. But just for the sake of argument, let's say a theater, because most of the shows we've been doing with Vince have been theaters in that aspect. I come in and look and see, are there carpet on the floors? Are the seats carpeted? Are they wood backs? Are they plastic backs? Is the floor concrete? Are the walls plaster? Are they acoustically dampened? Is there a balcony? Are there under balcony speakers under the under where they need to be? All of those questions cumulative to what is the PA going to do in response to the architecture of this room? So plaster is going to be a lot more bouncy. Anything like that is going to have a lot more reflections to it. Hard surfaces versus absorbent surfaces. And some venues are more treated than others. Some are more acoustically conscious of that. But you're also looking at theaters that are built around the turn of the century, that were built originally for non-amplified audience, right? Shakespearean theater. So in a modern world, we're bringing amplification into a space that is used to non-amplification. And therein lies the challenge, right? Trying to get articulation sonically in a room that doesn't want to accept it. With so many different reflections bouncing around, or getting a PA to cover up underneath the balcony or all the way in the back of the balcony, and all the things that come with that is definitely all things that are circulating in the back of your mind, especially when you walk into a new venue. I think, based on what I know my goals are sonically, is that I I'm not going to be coy about this. I'm very modest, but let's not be coy. I have the good fortune to mix one of the best bands in the industry. They're the best of the best. They're all respected musicians in their own disciplines, and Vince is aware of that, and he puts all of the best people on the same stage at the same time. So their professionalism, their seasoned musician mentality definitely makes my job easier, because they understand what it takes to play on stage at a comfortable level that's not going to offend the other musicians around you, and offer a palatable product to an engineer that can actually do something with it, offering a tone that's usable, right? And so all of those things come into play, making my job easier, because I have a great set of inputs to work with. But otherwise, it's a lot. It can be a lot of challenge, a lot of traffic to direct sonically to make all of that work. So starting at the top with the channel, I'm looking for acoustically, and I say acoustically loose, I mean what does that instrument, meaning if it's an electric guitar, what does their electric tone sound like in the room where we're going to be playing, stage volume wise? I like to hear what that's going to be, because it gives me a mental picture before I ever get a microphone on it, before I ever turn it up. This is the tone that musician is going for. So first of all, I have to take a mental picture of what that is, figure out the right microphone to use for the frequency range of that instrument, given like there's a different frequency range for bass guitar. There's a low frequencies, and then high frequencies you're going to have guitars, fiddles, all those other things in between, electric guitar even. But they're understanding our frequency range, our hearing spectrum is what we have, understanding those frequencies, where the instruments that you're going to be listening to lay within that spectrum of hearing frequencies, and then figuring out what you don't need and getting rid of it. So we have high pass filters, we have low pass filters, we have EQ itself, all of those, along with all the other tools that we use. But that's just one set of the tools on a channel strip that you would use to eliminate anything that's not needed to articulate what the tone of that instrument needs to be. So all of those things are filters, right? EQ, all of those things are a certain type of filter. And I use the analogy of like, everyone remembers the whole Guess Who game of like, you have all the pictures of faces, and your job is to eliminate it down to the person that you know is you're trying to guess. That's what we're doing in audio, especially in a channel strip of EQ, is that you've got all your frequencies. You've got from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz that potentially you can hear if your hearing is correct. You can hear all those frequencies. So a guitar is only going to hold, an electric guitar, for example, is only going to hold a section of those frequencies that you need to hear to be able to perceive the fidelity and the tone that artist or that instrumentalist is trying to portray. That's where you're trying to be transparent, is if they have a tone that is acceptable, which not everybody does, but in this instance, they have a perfectly acceptable tone. The only job you have is to make that tone represented louder and in balance. That's it. And when you boil it down, it is that simple. Now we complicate it with saying, we got to use this microphone, we got to use this preamp, this console, this speaker, all this stuff. But that's what we're boiling it down to. We're trying to make, and commenting on your gracious compliment that you gave about my mix, I appreciate. Commenting on the studio aspect of it is that it might be a fool's errand, but my genuine goal every night in a live setting is to prove, not to the audience, but to myself, that this room can sound like a record. That this PA can sound like a record, that if you closed your eyes and you know the band is on stage, that the PA melts away and that you're in the middle of the experience as it would be. That's the goal. That there's no feedback, everything is there. When you close your eyes, you can hear the instrument that's coming from the stage because it's properly panned in the PA, that you're out in the middle of the audience and you feel everything that was, you're perceiving it as it was meant to be perceived. So we in a lot of ways we're translators for the audience when we're mixing a show, where the band gets to play their instruments, but we get to play the band. And that's how I treat it. I try to treat it as every night has the potential to sound that good, no matter what PA you have, no matter this or that. Don't blame your tools, just work with the best you have. And you don't always have the best, but when you do, it offers potential for a really special evening of music. You're exactly right. It is not an accident. And a lot of, people who are not necessarily listening critically might not ever catch it, but you always notice when you don't hear it, right? Everything's going fine until all of a sudden you miss a solo or this or that, and I take it personally because the people, that was instilled in me early on. The people that are paying their hard-earned money are working class people, like we all are. I'm working class. They're coming, paying their hard-earned money to see that. They want to hear every solo. They want to see everything that's there to be seen to get their money's worth. And Vince is of the same mindset, that he wants to play even to the point of people walking out because they've had enough. He wants to make sure that he's always getting their money's worth. People are there, and he's going to play more than necessary to try to satisfy everybody. And that comes from a genuine place. So I've learned that from him and others that he surrounds himself with, and I try to replicate that and the care that I put into it. So there's always two sound checks. If we're going to be honest with you, it's the actual sound check you have allotted for your time limit during the day before you start the show, and then there's about the first 4 or 5 songs of the show. So the short answer is that I have a spectrum analyzer that lets me know what my decibel limit is, or lets me know what my decibel levels are when I'm tuning the PA, and I've got songs that I've listened to my entire life, and it coincidentally is generally Tom Petty because he's the first music that I remember listening to other than church music. So I use a couple of Petty songs to play in the PA and listen to, and I've listened to that music and those particular records so much that I know without even having to try that hard, I know by second nature that the subs are too loud. I can hear Petty's voice has this frequency range in it. I can recognize that same range in Vince's voice. That's going to be a problem, so that I need to EQ that out. I need to balance the subs and the tops. I need to walk every seat on the floor of whatever theater or whatever venue we're in. If there's a balcony, I need to do the same. I need to walk every section of that building to hear how the PA is responding in that section of seats, and then adjust accordingly. So I've got EQ that I walk around with on a tablet that is wireless, that I can go from section to section and change that EQ in the PA, do gain shading if necessary, if they haven't got that set up in whatever install is there or whatever vendor brings the PA in for the day, and just really intently listen in an empty room before band ever shows up how the room is responding to decibel level, and then you adjust that accordingly based on your empty room. And over time, that's something that you develop with experience and time coming into those rooms, understanding that generally you're going to have the same problems in the same frequency spectrums. Those theaters, they always have low mid issues where, you know, the stuff that makes you feel like it sounds woofy and mashed with low end. That's that spectrum of frequency that we hear that can be the bane of a musician's existence. If it's overpowered, not balanced correctly on stage or in the house. And we've also somehow grown this epidemic of overly loud low end and kick drums. I don't know where that came from. I think it might be a symptom of modern country music and what they interpret it being. But I didn't grow up listening to mixes where it was just kick drum and vocal, and for some reason, and I understand the argument behind it, but for a listening crowd, that's the difference between a party crowd and a listening crowd. You know, and yes, there are instances where you want to go to the arena and you want to shout and sing with your friends and scream the songs at the top of your lungs and go home exhausted. We fill arenas with audiences wanting to do that, right? So there's a time and place for that, but in a listening where people are wanting to come and hear every note that's being played, there's a different attention that is required for that. For Vince especially, because he carries so much intention with his vocals, and even he would say it too. He's always overshadowed his guitar playing with his vocal stature. Boo-hoo, right? Big bad problem to have. Not really a great problem to have, but at the same time, I understand how he feels about that, and it's a very vocal heavy mix. It's a very vocal heavy spotlight.
Vocal centric.
Yeah, vocal centric, very much so. There are harmony parts that are important, backing harmonies and all that stuff to be balanced in a way that once again complements his vocal ability without distracting from it.
Right.
And as far as building a mix or figuring out what those intentions are, what needs to be heard and not. I mean, country historically has always been vocally driven, vocally heavy, mix-wise, arrangement-wise, and lyrically too. You want to be able to intelligibility is a good word to use, of being able to understand what they're saying when what they're singing, versus a rock and roll band or a heavier type of music that might not be is the vocal might not be as prominent in the mix, right? It might be more, it might be there, but it might be implied. You might not necessarily be able to hear the words. You're expected to know them because there might not be something you can articulate, But country music is the opposite. We have to hear the lyrics. We have to hear the words because that's where the story is, and that's where people are focused. In the actual definition of stereo, yes, we are. And the fact that we are mixing a left and a right, we've got a mono sub that we send, but there is a panning image for sure. There is definitely a wider image that we're trying to use, and and I'm kind of answering other questions you've already asked with that answer itself, because you were talking about Bukovec's guitar tone and how we do all of that. A lot of it is simpler than you think. A lot of it is just getting people, other musicians, out of the way sonically, and that can be just as simple as boosting and pulling faders. And the instinctive choreography that it takes to do that in a live setting is where I've learned to understand value. I used to think it was, well, this is my own self-loathing, but I used to sit there and think anybody could do this. Any monkey could push a fader and make it louder, right? And I had that in my brain for the longest time of like, wow, there's really no, I don't find my own value in this. Not to say, but I just didn't understand that value from other people's perspectives, and even the audience or the artist that you're trying to pump their product out or what have you. Just didn't have that perspective. And it's just come with time.
Yeah.
Some people might call it, I don't know. I never considered it to be lazy mixing, but minimalist mixing. And minimalist doesn't mean lazy, and it doesn't mean that at all. But it really means learning how to do the most with the least. Like anything else, we always consider, like, everyone knows the proverb "less is more," and that can come true in these instances. A lot of the guys that are top of their game, like the guy that mixes, just for an extreme situation, the guy that mixes AC/DC and had for a long time, I can't remember his name, but you hear stories of other engineers over the years, this and that, and different things, and he still mixes an old analog console. I think it might have been a Midas XL4. He still uses graphic EQs for his main PA tuning, and he's got a rack of simple compressors that he needs when he needs them. And I know that's just a 4-piece rock and roll band, but it's also one of the biggest bands in the world. And if anything else, out of that instance, you can prove that it is possible to do it simple. It is. So why would you overcomplicate it? And I use the analogy, a good mechanic, when they go to work on a car, is not going to take their toolbox and throw all of their wrenches on the floor and then grab them up and start using all of them because they think they need them. No, a good mechanic is going to have an organized workbench that they go to. They see a screw that needs to be turned, they go find the wrench they need, and they go turn the screw and they put the wrench back, right?
What does this wrench fit that I have?
Right. So the analogy on our world is, why would you do that with a giant library of plugins? Why? So it comes down, what I've noticed, it comes down to people who I think, in my opinion, overuse the technology that we have at our fingertips, are the ones that get in trouble. Understanding that just because we live in a digital world doesn't mean you can't still think in an analog mentality. And analog, a lot of times, can be simple, and it should be, if the situation allows for it to be. So in that aspect, just because you have all these bells and whistles doesn't mean you need to pull all the wrenches out on the floor and show everybody all of your shiny brand new toys that you have. You really need to focus on what you need, what tool you need to make the job work. Understand how that tool works before you ever get it in your hand, or learn by using it, obviously is the best way to do it. Understanding what it is you need to do with that tool and then learning how to use it. But I've seen so many people throw 3, 4, 5 plugins, however many that their console allows, because they think it's going to enhance their sonic quality, when what it's really doing is adding latency, it's degrading your audio signal, and you end up compensating for it with, yet again, more plugins. I've seen that time and time again. I've come in to be a guest engineer to fill in for someone, or a tour was looking at getting a new audio guy and they wanted me to come in to figure out what was wrong with their mix or this, that. And time again, I've come in, and instead of thinking I have to reinvent the wheel, I just start turning things off that they're using that might be compensating for this and this and that. And when you get back down to just channel strip, input, microphone, boom, there's the mix, there's the image, there's the space, and then you're off and running. Every plugin you add to it, whether you realize it or not, is adding a certain amount of gain to said input. It's adding a noise floor, it's adding other harmonics that you might not be aware of, this and that. So I'm not the anti-plugin, don't get me wrong. I mean, I use plugins, but it's just like anything else, learning how to use them properly so that they don't distract, but they, yet again, they complement. Anything that's taking you away, because all of our consoles these days have screens on them, just like our phones, just like our computers, everything has a screen. The more attention that those screens, the more attention that you allow those screens to take over, the less you're in the room with the music that you're trying to mix. All of a sudden you're in an office in a cubicle, and that defeats the purpose of why we're doing this in the first place. And I've used the Gambit over the years. I mean, right now we're on a PM5 Yamaha Rivage, which is my new favorite car to drive, my new Cadillac, shiny it's got everything that we want. And prefacing that with the conversation that we've been having is that we do try to approach this in an analog mentality, but exist in a digital world. Even so much so that this year, before we were building the logistics of the tour, we discussed the concept of taking an analog console out on both ends of the snake, monitors and front of house. And so we've used Avid consoles, we've used Yamaha consoles, and just across my career, not necessarily just this one particular gig, but Digico, all of the heavy hitters in our industry. I've used all of them, either in one-off gigs where you fly in, you've got a tech helping you operate the console, or you actually build a console and a file from scratch and take it on tour, and everything in between. So it's all of the consoles that we have these days at our fingertips, they all have, just like anything else, each platform has got something you wished it had and something you wished all consoles had. There's always a workflow situation, or there's something about this that this console platform got right that you wished all the other ones would get right. The plus and minuses, I think for me, and this could just be my time spent on the console, but there's some things about the workflow that ultimately makes sense when you understand the platform, but to someone who doesn't get a chance to build a file from scratch and take it on tour and have the same layout every day, this and that, there's definitely a learning curve on how you can lay the console out, because you can do anything you want to now. There's an overabundance of options, so it's once again whittling down what you don't need. But just the workflow aspect of all of it, learning how the workflow works on that particular platform versus this, and all of them make some things easier and all of them make some things harder. But overall, the pros, the biggest pros of the Yamaha for sure is just the general sonic quality coming off the preamp. The Rupert Neve plugins that they have, the Silk feature, all that stuff doesn't just have Rupert Neve's name on it, but is actually signed off on professionally of something that he would actually represent, something that he would support. Put his name on it, and yeah, literally and figuratively. But so all of those things give us a lot of confidence, and has so, and I've just over the course of listening to other people's mixes, and once we got this particular console in and started listening to tracks through it, the amount of time it took to get from sterile tracks to a finished product mix by listening to playback and running things through the console and tweaking it until it sounds proper. The amount of time it took to do that was so much faster on the Yamaha than it was otherwise, because the tone and the image that they have figured out with the sonic quality of these platforms is incredible.
Sure.
So one of the biggest tools we have is one of the Neve plugins, the 5045, the primary source enhancer, and we also have other unnamed, nothing important, but unnamed plugins like just onboard Yamaha plugins.
Yeah, the native plugins.
The native ones, yeah. We use so the 5045 is a big component in his signal chain. Other than just the channel strip itself, I've got just like a damage control 31 band that's inserted, as well as dynamic EQ, which is multi-band compression, because Vince has got a lot of that low mid buildup naturally in his voice, and that mixed with the proximity effect that you have with dynamic microphones, the closer you get to it, the more low end is perceived to that capsule. So we have that, and also the good part of him knowing how to sing on a microphone properly is that he comes up, and so it fills up the capsule, fills up the fidelity of what the capsule can interpret mechanically. So in that aspect, it's very important to have those things. And the primary source enhancer, it's basically a polarity flip, but the way that I have had it explained to me, and I forgive my ignorance if I don't explain it properly, but basically just like a dynamic flipping of polarity, so that when they're not talking, it acts similarly to a gate, to a noise gate, to where it's turning on, engaging when he's talking, and disengaging when he's not. And in a wedge-based band, for the monitor engineer's sake and mine as well, because we have a symbiotic relationship sonically, that what he's doing affects me and what I'm doing affects him. In that aspect, it gives us a lot more control, because our monitor engineer, Matt Rauch, is using that on his side of the snake to control the dynamics for Vince's vocal volume in his wedge. So when it comes to all that, getting the maximum amount of gain before feedback is most beneficial to both sides of the snake. And the primary source enhancer allows us to do that. It allows us to get more stability before feedback, more gain before we run into issues with feeding back through his vocal mic into his wedges and coming back through the PA, and all of that becomes sympathetic. Right. And in a perfect world, which we are not in, especially in a live situation, you don't get isolation like you would in a studio environment, where you have a vocalist in a separate room and you're not going to have any of the guitar mic bleeding in. We have all of those challenges, and we have to do it in front of an audience. So figuring out, knowing how those frequencies are responding with a certain amount of distance between the source and the microphone, even though we're not there to mix his vocal like a drum overhead, it becomes that. Understanding that, hearing it, and figuring out how to incorporate it into the mix. So what I would do in that instance is that if we're getting a certain amount of response coming through Vince's vocal mic, then I might lighten the load on the overheads for the day and pull those back. Might not need those as much, because all of a sudden you're adding to something you already have too much of. So understanding how those microphones are working together and against each other in the live relationship, it's all incorporating to the mix you're trying to create. And you have to work with it instead of against it, because as soon as you start working against it, you come into problems. Well, I mean, you're still picking up the frequency response from the Bloom line, because they're all Bloom line array. I mean, like you said, they've got the figure 8 set up, but because they are ribbon microphones, they are of a darker articulation when it comes to sonic response. It's not as much of a challenge as you think it is. And when it comes to his guitars, it really is the same as Bukovac. I'm glad that that people respond to it, that like you responded to how it sounded. But it really is just a high pass and a low pass, and some of the harsh stuff that is in like the 2K range the stuff that actually feels like it's piercing your ear when you hear it, right? Those harsh high frequencies. Some of that's just softened a little bit on the EQ, and other than a minimal amount of compression, it really is just the movements on the faders and the choreography of sonically moving these guitars back and pulling these guitars up and working with the bleed of the other microphones. And the same thing with the ribbons on Vince's guitar cabs. I'm not saying that it's easy, and you have to define the fact that simple doesn't mean easy and easy doesn't mean simple, right? It can be simple in concept and difficult in execution, right? The concept is simple in the fact that I don't have any major crazy bells or whistles. It's a good microphone. It's choosing a darker microphone that is normally going to be harboring a brighter tone. So that in itself is fixing half of your problems right there by getting the right microphone on the right source. He plays a lot of Telecasters. He plays a lot of, in the country world, those tones are a lot brighter in nature or in frequency or where they're playing. Telecasters and those instruments in general, they are inherently brighter in their tone. So to combat putting a microphone on it that was going to over exaggerate what I don't want, that's therein lies the execution of it is I know because I've listened to Vince's guitars for years now. I know what guitar he's going to play and how bright it's going to be versus on which guitar he's going to play. So we've done different setups in the past, microphone wise, but over the course of that evolution, learning what I like and what I don't like and what I know he's trying to accomplish with his tone, that's where we landed, at least for this tour this year. And I love the tone of the Royers. And if you can have the confidence of traveling with a fragile ribbon microphone, which they've made them more roadworthy these days, but being able to bring those nicer ribbon microphones out that might be used in more of a studio situation is really what allows us to attempt the record quality for the show every night.
Yeah, well,
Unfortunately, I feel like it's the end of an era in a lot of ways. Not to say that the era is dead, not to say that the culture is dead, but and given that the emulations and the modelers, all those things are getting better and better and better, but you're losing a generation that understands what it's like to actually stand up and plug into a Fender Tweed amp, turn it up, and that's what you've got. And understanding the importance of what people refer to as tone and how important that really is, and how much time, effort, money, attention is given to finding that proverbial tone for the ones that understand how important that is. And I know musicians that are still looking for it. They found it, lost it, found it again, and lost it again, and they're going to continue. It's like a rock that they keep finding in the river, and they keep throwing it back in the river to find it again. When you get to be surrounded by people who care that deeply about that tone, and Vince, he said that to me years ago, and I never forgot it. I mean, I wouldn't even put it past as far as having the words tattooed on me at some point in my life. But the 3 words that he said, and I've said it earlier in the interview, is every note matters. And that's the 3-word phrase that really, really twisted its knife into me. And I thought about a lot, and all of the layers of what those 3 words mean, all of the different layers. And that 3-word phrase accentuates everything we've already talked about. and the importance of everything we've already talked about. So that's why we put so much effort and care into it.